I'm also honored that later in the program, we're going to be joined by Rob Shriver from Democracy Forward, who will also provide really critical information regarding some of the lawsuits and other actions that are being taken right now in response to what we're seeing regarding our federal workforce. Let me just first say just how callous really, and how awful what we're seeing is in terms of the witch hunt that is targeting not only our federal employees, these are civil servants who are serving our country, but thinking about the disparate impact that these actions are having on Prince Georgians and Marylanders is really, really heartbreaking. We have so many civil servants who, very similar to my grandmother, who was a civil servant who worked for the Pentagon, go to work each and every day. They don't go there to serve Democrats or Republicans. They have gone there to serve the American people, and they have done so with distinction. Many who have worked for decades in our federal government, I've spoken with many of them in these days, where I talked, for example, to a woman who's worked for 37 years for the Department of Agriculture. She's in a position that she was placed in by this current president in his first term, and she's been targeted and placed on leave. There's another woman I spoke with who's worked for 35 years in the federal government, who was deeply concerned about the impact of removing her from position and thinking about how it would impact children who were hungry. So one thing that should be made abundantly clear is the malicious actions of this administration that are really motivated by vengeance are not only harming civil servants who are serving our country, but it's also harming the people that they serve. It's hard to imagine the civil servants and the treatment that they have received without remembering that they are the people who are ensuring that our seniors get their social security checks, that veterans get the benefits that they need, that so many of our children who are dependent on Head Start and needing that for their development, these are the people who are harmed by the actions taken by this administration. So you should know that we are not taking this laying down. Myself and my colleagues are deeply concerned. We're using every tool we have to make sure that we are pushing back, that we are holding the administration accountable. We're in the process now, the nominations process. And so we recently held the floor last week all night long to really delay many of these nominations, really in response to the horrific treatment of the civil servants across our country, as well as many other actions on behalf by this administration. We're going to continue to demand answers of our officials in this administration, as well as do what we can to support the many, many lawsuits that have been filed. Again, Rob Shriver is going to be on the call. He can answer very specifically what is happening with some of these lawsuits. But we have been joined by our friends in labor. For example, AFGE filed a suit regarding that fork in the road memo. We've also seen suits that have been filed regarding the federal freezes of grant dollars that are certainly going to have a devastating impact on Maryland. Everything from grant dollars that aid our Chesapeake Bay efforts to funds that help with victims of domestic violence. We know that our firefighters and others will also be adversely impacted by the freezing of federal funds, and we're not going to watch while Maryland is harmed without standing up. And so I've been really honored to stand along with our senior senator, Chris Van Hollen, as well as a very talented delegation that we have in Maryland, Glenn Ivey, Congressman Glenn Ivey, and Congressman Hoyer from Prince George's County, and others across the state. And we're going to continue to make sure that we are working to protect the Maryland's interest, as well as to do what we can to protect the civil servants who go to work every day on behalf of the American people, as well as the people that they serve. So again, I'm honored to be on this call tonight, and I'm looking forward to answering questions.
Thank you so very much, U.S. Senator Angela Alsobrooks. So let's begin with a few of our questions before our special guest joins us in a few minutes. We're going to start off with State Senator Nick Charles. You just heard U.S. Senator Angela Alsobrooks speaking about resources. With fewer state resources available, how do you believe Prince George's County can continue to support job creation, small businesses, and Black-owned businesses without relying on increased state spending?
Taylor, that's a great question. and it's something that I'm constantly going back and forth with a lot of our colleagues in the Senate and with our colleagues across the state. We'll be having our MBE night actually this coming week, our Minority Business Enterprise night that's focusing on making sure that our Black-owned businesses, our minority-owned businesses know about the opportunities that are at the state level. But what I think we really we have some missed opportunities when you look at all of the businesses across the state, some of our larger businesses that are a part of our Chamber of Commerce organization. We have a lot of companies that are doing work right here in Prince George's County. And so I'm working with the president of the chamber so that we can start really identifying opportunities for a lot of our smaller businesses to tap into the resources and become the go-to business for uh, for Comcast or for Pepco or for Washington Gas. A lot of those projects are happening right here in our communities. So tackling the opportunities, making sure that these small businesses know of those localized opportunities that exist. In addition to focusing on that, then you have a lot of our quasi-government entities that we have a lot of opportunities for our small businesses to grow. When you look at WMATA, when you look at Maryland National Capital Park and Planning, across the board, you have a lot of our quasi governments. And then in Prince George's, we have a total of 27 municipalities. And so there's a lot of work that's going around these 27 municipalities and making sure that our small businesses truly have access to all of those opportunities. And then you look at our county and all of the government contracts that exist within our county and then also with the state. And so when we start looking at these opportunities, I think we truncate down to the smallest level so that we're not so heavily focused on the federal government. But in addition to not just being so focused on the federal government, I think this is another grand opportunity for us to truly look at opportunities that expand outside of government services. We know that we are not a huge, we don't have a huge industrial base here in Prince George's County. But when you look at the last presidential administration and what they did with the CHIPS Act, we have an opportunity to look at some of these chip manufacturers globally, look at the top 30 plus chip manufacturers, look at the geopolitical issues that are happening around those chip manufacturers where they are located, figure out ways to bring them right here to Prince George's County so that we can maximize on the opportunities of all the higher education that we have so that we have smaller businesses who can then tie in and become subcontractors or become folks that provide services, some of these larger chip manufacturers that we can bring here. So I think we have opportunities to look across, and this isn't a single person's job. It's going to take all of us from United States Senate, from our congressional members, from the governor, from the state house to the state senate, to our next county executive, to the county council, but also the EDC. We have a new director at the EDC, leveraging also our Chamber of Commerce. When we bring all of our heads together, I think we have a great opportunity not to rely so heavily on the federal government, but look at these smaller opportunities that can turn into large opportunities across the board.
Maryland State Senator, with that being said, I do have a question to ask you in addition to that. With you having less than 90 days in which to get a lot of things done for the remainder of the year, where do you see, is it possible? What can be done? That's a short period of time for such a heavy lift.
Was that to me? I'm sorry, Taylor. Was that to me or was that to Senator Alsobrooks? I'm sorry.
That was to you just in regards to, getting it done with in a quick amount of time. What is your thoughts about getting it done? Because it sounds like a heavy lift that you and the other senators are working on the state level.
No, it is a heavy lift. We got a lot of opportunity, a lot of things that we're focused on. We got a $3 billion deficit that is in front of us. We have the blueprint that the House and the Senate fought for tirelessly to make sure that we cover our community schools and that we focus on the impacts of education, because we know that that is the opportunity that most folks need in order to get to the next level. But we have so many different issues, and now with this new administration coming in and taking away a lot of the opportunities, a lot of jobs, like the senator mentioned, just like her, my mother is a retired federal employee. My father is a federal employee, and when you look around a lot of our communities, they're all federal employees, and so between those federal employees and then the government contractors that uh, we have to move at a very fast pace. And like a lot, like I said, with some of the focus that I want to have with working with our chamber and the conversations that we've had over the last couple of years, these are some things that we have to move forward on very fast. So, and the only reason I didn't hear you earlier because I was looking at the messages and I saw Belinda Queen had some questions, so I was looking at her questions and
Well,
didn't even hear.
they're gonna send them to me soon. You'll see me looking down, so I promise you I am paying
Yeah.
attention, just sending me the information. So again, State Senator Nick Charles, thank you. Real quick question for Council Member Calvin Hawkins. What is the County Council doing in response to what's happening on the federal level in regards to, we have a lot of in federal employees that are working in Prince George's County. Can you speak about that briefly?
Thank you, Teller. With over 33,000 federal employees here in Prince George's County, I'm grateful at this time, notwithstanding the challenges that we face. United States Senator Angela Alsobrooks left an outstanding person in the position of Chief Administrative Officer, Tara Jackson, who is now the acting county executive. Working with Acting County Executive Jackson and her senior team, along with the council leadership, we are experiencing everything you can imagine and how we are addressing the challenges that will face our federal employees. We have our Office of Law, which is comprised of our legal team, our lawyers, looking at what does it means, what does these executive orders means, and what we have in place. Fortunately, before our U.S. Senator left, she established an Office of Procurement that can go right in and determine where opportunities are. And one of the things we are working with right now is, what about the wording, like set asides? How does that deal with DEI, and how does that deal with these executive orders? So I assure you, and for all those who are listening, your local government, working with Tara Jackson, your county council, even working with our Superintendent House on ensuring that we are supporting federal employees and their kids as they address what's going on. As a matter of fact, and I'll close on this, I now have legislation that's moving through the council to set up a moratorium on foreclosures, because many of these federal employees will have some housing challenges, and we are being proactive to ensure that we are putting initiatives in place to address those concerns as they start impacting what we're doing in Prince George's County.
Thank you, Prince George's County Councilmember Calvin Hawkins. U.S. Senator Angela Alsobrooks, I know that we are waiting for our special guest to join us, Rob Shriver from Democracy Forward. Could you perhaps take a few minutes to talk about on a national level what is being done to help families in the state of Maryland and in Prince George's County, of course, that are federal workers that are being impacted by these layoffs and firings?
Well, first of all, let me just say that there are a number of actions. Oh, I see Rob is actually on the line. So he's here already. And so I'll turn it over to him in a moment to talk about some of what is happening. But there are a number of lawsuits that have been filed and a number of actions that have been taken. As I've mentioned, labor unions have filed. We've seen a number of injunctions that have been granted, including ones that stop the federal freezes, that have injunctive relief that's been granted regarding the federal freezes that affect grant funding that impact streams of funds. I mentioned firefighters and police officers, but so many aspects of our daily lives are impacted. The violence against women, so affecting domestic violence help there. We saw that initially the portal for Medicaid and for Head Start were closed. And so we've had to really work to make sure that those are reopened. But I'm going to hand it over to Rob, and he can tell you a bit about some of the actions that are being taken to protect our workers.
Thank you, Senator Alsobrooks, and welcome, Rob Shriver with Democracy Forward. For those that are not familiar with you and what Democracy Forward is about and their focus, will you take a few minutes before we start delving into the federal layoffs and the information that you can give employees that are dealing with this or facing it already?
Sure thing, Taylor. And Senator, thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to get a chance to talk to federal workers and their families about what's going on. So my name's Rob Shriver. I'm the managing director of a new program called Civil Service Strong. This is a program that provides resources and information to federal workers about what's going on in the Trump administration and about the rights that they have. It's part of an organization called Democracy Forward. Democracy Forward has been around since 2017 and has been at the forefront of a lot of litigation efforts that maybe you've heard about involving Trump's actions and the DOGE actions against the federal workforce. I am fresh off of 4 years in the Biden-Harris administration. I worked for all 4 years at the Office of Personnel Management, and I spent the last 8 months as the acting director of the agency. And it's my second time around. I was at OPM also during the Obama administration, and I was a lawyer for the National Treasury Employees Union for 13 years before that. So working on behalf of civil servants has been my life's work, Taylor.
I do have a couple of questions, and I know that we'll probably get some questions from those that are tuning in from the state and in Prince George's County as well. Now, you talked about the litigation landscape. Do you believe that states' attorney generals suing the federal government will stop it or be able to stop it?
So I think it's all hands on deck as far as litigation. We've been working with federal labor unions. We've been working with grantees. We've been working with churches and other religious organizations, and we've been working with state attorneys generals. And you kind of have to figure out who's best positioned to bring which legal challenges based on which actions are at issue. I think the state attorneys generals are really critical partners in all of this, and there are important state issues at stake here. And I think we haven't even begun to really see what the impact is going to be on the American people, on the people of Maryland, when all of these federal employees start, no longer being able to deliver the services that the people of the country, the people of the state of Maryland depend upon. And I'm sure the state attorneys generals will be watching that closely and looking for opportunities to help hold the administration accountable for its obligations under the law.
Rob, this is a two-part question. So we have some people, thousands, that have been laid off, and we have others that are still employed and are fearful. What do you say to each of them at this point? What should they do or not do?
Well, the first thing that I say to them all is you have a lot of people who care about you and are fighting for you. A lot of people on this call who care about you and are fighting for you and think that what's happening to you is wrong. And, you guys know administrations change. There are different priorities. Sometimes the budgets increase, sometimes budgets go down, sometimes certain programs are prioritized, sometimes they're deprioritized. That's just part of the landscape when you work in the federal government. The problem is that, this administration's not playing by the rules. And rules exist to make sure that as those changes happen, that you're all treated fairly, and you're treated based on your merit and your qualifications. And, it's not based on partisan politics or, punishing folks who maybe worked on an initiative like a DEI initiative that this administration doesn't support. So you should know that you have rights. You should know that if you're part of a bargaining unit, that you should check in with your union representative. That's kind of the first line of defense. If you are subject to an adverse personnel action like a removal or a demotion or a suspension, you have rights to submit appeals before the Merit System Protection Board. If you're subject to a prohibited personnel practice, which is basically other things that are done for reasons not based on merit, you may be able to get relief from the Office of Special Counsel. So be aware of your rights. Check out places like civilservicestrong.org that have resources that help walk you through it. Be aware that there are deadlines, so that if you get removed and you think that there's something fishy about it, typically have 30 days to file something with the Merit System Protection Board. So make sure you don't let those deadlines pass, and find the help that you need, either from your union or through getting your own legal counsel.
And this has been a big discussion since the letters went out, giving people an opportunity to resign on their own. What happens if the federal government doesn't have the money to pay them through September as the letter indicated? There's concern about that.
And I get that concern, and that's why I've had a problem with this fork in the road deferred resignation from the very beginning. There are established programs to offer feds early retirement or separation incentives. They're offered under laws that were enacted by Congress and implemented through OPM regulations. So federal employees could count on those programs. This fork in the road deferred resignation is not authorized by law, is not funded. And so there are a lot of questions about whether the government's going to hold up to this deal and what happens if it doesn't. And there's a few key things I'm looking at. One is they said if you took the deal, then you weren't going to get fired. But I'm already hearing stories of people who took the deal and now are being terminated. So that's one thing to look out for. Two, the government is funded through March 14th. There will be a new budget, another continuing resolution or a budget enacted. Who's to say that the Republican-controlled Congress won't defund this in their new budget, leaving folks without the rest of the payment? And then three, my understanding is that folks that take this deal have to sign a very broad waiver that prohibits you from bringing any claim arising out of your employment. I'm watching to see whether they try to use that waiver to stop feds from enforcing this very agreement that they've signed. So is this a real agreement, or are they going to use that waiver clause to say you can't bring any kind of challenge if we don't honor it? Those are the things I'll be looking for, Taylor.
Really scary. Rob, would you take a real quick second for those, what I think was last check was over 60,000 who did take the early opt out, right? The fork in the road. So if for some reason they did that and they were terminated, what exactly does that mean? What's the
What it
difference?
means,
Already stepped
yeah,
away.
yeah, what it means is the administration's not living up to its promise that you would get paid through September 30th. Instead, what they're doing is saying, okay, you signed up for this deal and now your services are no longer needed. And so you're out and you don't get the rest of that money that would take you through September 30th. Now, these are some isolated instances that I've heard of so far, but I have heard of them. I've seen it. So it's something to look out for. Maybe it's an administrative error, like they're kind of flying by the seat of their pants with this system that they've set up. And so I'd say if this happens to you, first thing to do is go to your agency HR and say, hey, wait a second, I signed up for this other deal here. So you guys said I wasn't going to get terminated if I did that. I wouldn't put it past them that there's an administrative error that's happened here. But if it's not an error and if they intended to do that, then I think consulting with legal counsel on your rights would be appropriate.
U.S. Senator Angela Alsobrooks, what are you hearing from your constituents in the state of Maryland as it pertains to these fork in the road options and these mass firings?
What I'm hearing, I think to Rob's point, we hear so many people who are concerned, confused. There's been just, so little information. I think it's been vague and intentionally so. The very sad thing is that this administration intends to create chaos and confusion. It was very sad that Russell Vogt, who I voted against his nomination to head OMB, literally said he hoped to cause trauma for our federal workers. And trauma is what has been caused from so many who, on a daily basis, are having communications shut off with 15 minutes notice. People who have been they're fired, and then within 15 minutes their computers are off. And so this is a mass witch hunt that has occurred. That has been It's not only wrong, but as Rob indicated, it's also illegal. And people want to understand what their rights are, what the remedies are. But as you can imagine, this has caused extreme duress in people who, some of whom were approaching the years where they could retire. People who had worked in the government for many, many years, who had a year or so left before they could retire, who were unceremoniously fired, really without cause. And so we're going to continue to support them by making sure that we are not only doing what we can legislatively, but we are going to continue to support these lawsuits that are being filed as well. We want people to share with us their experiences. It's going to be really important. I know that Rob can share with you. There's a whistleblower website that has been set up in the government for people to share their experiences. We want to hear those experiences. They help in those lawsuits. People can call also my office. I have two office numbers. One is a Bowie office number that is 301-860-0414. Again, 301-860-0414. And then the office in Washington is 202-224-4524. People have literally come in person to the office because they have been just so overwhelmed and just so stressed out by all of this. So we want to continue to hear from them. We assure you that we're going to continue doing everything we can to make sure that we are supporting our federal workers and standing up to these wicked actions that are being done. Let's be clear about why they're being done. This has nothing to do with what the president said his priority would be, which was to bring down the cost of living. He told us that he was going to be focused on bringing down the cost of groceries. He was going to be bringing down the cost of housing. None of those things have been the focus of this administration. In fact, costs are increasing, and we expect costs to continue to increase. Grocery prices, housing prices, all of these prices are going to go up, and most especially because of the tariffs that are being put in place. So he's not done any of what he promised, but instead, he is really overseeing these mass firings to give tax breaks to his billionaire friends. That's literally what this is about. It has nothing to do with what's best for the American people. It has to do with really enriching these billionaires. And so we're going to continue pushing back and working to make sure we do everything we can to protect our federal workers.
This question is for Rob Shriver. You just heard U.S. Senator Angela Alsobrooks talk about the whistleblower. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? And I'm sure with saying that, it's a scary word now because I think we've seen from this administration, if you do tell, you're definitely going to be in trouble.
Yeah, I think it's really important to review what federal employees can do if they find themselves in a situation where they're being asked to do something illegal, they're experiencing instances of waste, fraud, and abuse or crimes. So the first thing you should know is there are confidential mechanisms for you to report this conduct. You can report, you can report to your Office of Inspector General. That's one place. Now, of course, Trump has fired most IGs across the government, but there are acting IGs in those offices, and that's a place you can go. There also is a confidential disclosure unit at the Office of Special Counsel. And that's a federal agency, osc.gov. You can look it up. They have a mechanism to confidentially report disclosures that are of concern. There are organizations like the Government Accountability Project, which is at whistleblower.org, the Project on Government Oversight. and there's other organizations like that that specialize in helping whistleblowers. They have a confidential intake process right on their website. They have people that manage those intake processes and can talk to you confidentially about how best to handle any disclosures that you need to make and protections that you need to have. And then federal employees also have a privilege to make disclosures to members of Congress confidentially. So it's important to know that those rights exist. If you are retaliated against for whistleblowing activities, you do have rights. Again, you can go to the Office of Special Counsel. They specialize in whistleblower protections, and you may have an appeal right to the Merit System Protection Board as well. And ultimately, those MSPB decisions can be appealable to court.
All right, thank you so very much, Rob. So I have a couple of quick questions to kind of, this is for anybody on the panel to ask, and these are specific now to Prince George's County. But so Senator Alsobrooks, Councilmember Hawkins, and Senator Charles, you each represent different levels of influence, federal, county, and community leadership. How do you see your roles working to create a stronger Prince George's County, like specific ways that you plan to collaborate on key issues like public safety, economic development, and education, because these all kind of work together?
Well, I'll just add really quickly before Senator Charles. I see he's going to come in just a second. I see, you know what, we worked really hard together. Myself, Senator Charles, Council Member Hawkins, and the council to bring tremendous amounts of federal funding to Prince George's County over the last several years. Much of that funding was dedicated to transportation and infrastructure. For example, we had federal funding that helped us to aid the development project at New Carrollton that many people have seen. Really, it's been an amazing project that has been ongoing. And other investments we've had around the Suitland Town Center. We had infrastructure dollars there. We've been able to bring back federal dollars here to aid us in growing an electric vehicle fleet for our buses in our county. So there have been investments that have been made, and I'm going to work to make sure that we continue to protect the funding that is coming to Prince George's County, as well as the rest of the state. These infrastructure and transportation projects are critical to continuing to grow the economy in our county. The one thing we absolutely must do is to grow the revenues that come to Prince George's County. I think that everyone can agree that we have seen a real burden on homeowners in particular, where we have relied so heavily on property taxes to fund the services that we need in our county. And this is not a sustainable model. It's the reason that the federal funds that we have gotten, state funds, to really contribute to our development projects and to our into attracting business are going to be really an important thing going forward, is making sure we keep our eye on growing jobs, growing the economy, so that we can continue to provide the services that Prince Georgians need and deserve.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback off of that, Taylor, and repeat what I said earlier. It's a collaborative effort across the board for every level of government, from the federal government all the way down even to our municipalities. It is collaboration at its finest, and it's going to take all of us. What I said earlier, I'm going to reiterate that again. It's imperative that we work very closely with the EDC. It's imperative that we work very closely with our chamber and truly grow the businesses that we have right here in our county. We've ran into a lot of issues in the state of Maryland where we never met the 30% goal that was set for minority business enterprises winning contracts. Through work with our governor, we've been able to bring on a new chief procurement officer for the state of Maryland who has truly been focused in on increasing minority business participation. And we've seen a huge increase in the amount of government contracts at the state level going to minority businesses. I think the same thing can happen at our county level down all the way into our municipal level, working directly with our quasi-government organizations. And when you see our small businesses focused in and they're winning the contracts, they are what we're looking for. So we're not truly reliant, as Senator Alsobrooks said, reliant heavily on the backs of our homeowners. We truly have to grow that commercial tax base. And I think it starts when you look at jurisdictions like Montgomery County, and they have the Lockheed Martins, they have a lot of the large federal government contractors. We can do the same thing for a lot of the companies right here in our county. We just have to be very focused on getting them into the opportunities, leveraging the EDC, leveraging the chamber to put them in a position to win. And that takes all of us at the table. And I'm so happy for Senator Alsobrooks and all of the great things she's done. Making sure that, she worked with us heavily to make sure we have a person at the state level that sits on I'm about to forget what it's already called, Senator Also Brooks, where we got folks in the Stadium Authority for the state of Maryland. We have never had anybody sitting on the Stadium Authority, and so Baltimore City has leveraged that to build schools and also take care of the stadiums. And so that's something where now we have dollars going to the Blue Line corridor and truly being focused on bringing businesses along the Blue Line. There may be fundamental differences on how certain elected officials think of where we should start with the Blue Line corridor development, but we have to start the Blue Line corridor development. A lot of effort was put in place to bring this $400+ million home so that we can see a huge change on a corridor that has been left behind for years. DC's done a wonderful job with their Green Line corridor development. You can look at along that entire Green Line, all of the mass development that's happened that's increased their commercial tax base. And that's something that we can do right here with our Blue Line corridor. And with somebody like Calvin Hawkins at the forefront of being our county executive and focusing on bringing the right type of businesses here and going outside of the role and really being a true spokesperson for our county, it's those type of things that we need. And so that's why I'm happy to be able to be here with two amazing leaders, because I know as a chair of the delegation, when I served as a House chair, when Calvin served as the chair of the county council, when Angela served as our county executive, we were able to bring some significant wins home to Prince George's County. And it's that time for us to do it again as we're facing these critical, tough times with what the federal government is pushing down, with the $3 billion shortfall we have with the state government, and even with the energy crisis that we're dealing with.
So I have some questions to fire in here because I know we're getting close to the top of the hour. Real quick, piggyback on what you just said, Maryland State Senator Nick Charles, but this is for U.S. Senator Alsobrooks. So Prince George's County is experiencing major growth from the Blue Line corridor, which you just mentioned about the new business investments. However, there is also concern about rising costs pushing longtime residents out. Senator Alsobrooks, how can federal resources support equitable development?
Well, I think equitable development happens on the local level. We brought in funds from the federal government, as I mentioned, at the New Carrollton Metro, for example. That was when I worked as county executive to ensure that we had their workplace housing, workforce housing, which was a part of that model. We used funding there to make sure that we had affordable housing, even at that Metro Center. So it is working in collaboration with our federal officials who would bring back the raise grant funding that we used, and worked to make sure that the county did its part to make sure that the housing goals included workforce housing. So I think we have to continue to maintain that as a priority. There is no development that should go forward without also really accounting for how it impacts our affordable housing goals. Workforce housing is going to be a really big issue. For housing affordability is a huge issue in our county and really across the state. So working to make sure that we're funding, but also making sure we keep those goals in mind, that we have to do things like we've done, using right of first refusal, using the Housing Investment Trust Fund, making sure that we use all the tools we have to make sure that affordable housing is not an afterthought, but it has to be a critical part of any development plan that we have, is making sure that the county is not only growing, but it accounts for the hardworking men and women of our county who have made our county as great as it is, and that they should be able to live here and continue to live in places that they can afford, even as the county grows.
This is another question that just came in. The administration.
Teller, may I just add to that?
Absolutely, Council Member Hawkins. Absolutely. Sorry about that.
I wanted to add, we spoke about the Blue Line corridor and some of the small business or some of the minority companies that will demonstrate and evidence that there is a collaboration to ensure we have local county business, but Black businesses involved in the Blue Line Corridor. At the very beginning of it, at Southern Avenue, Eastern Avenue, there's AWASH Associates that's building affordable housing and market value housing right there on Maryland Avenue. And as you come up the Blue Line Corridor, you see Banneker Venture right there at Addison Road and Central Avenue, building a development that will meet the concerns that our senator addressed. And lastly, you have Velocity over at Kingdom Square, building. So those are three companies that evidence that not only is development taking place along the Blue Line Corridor, we're using county businesses, small businesses, Black businesses, and county executive almost a year ago or 2 years ago, right in the very month of February, you had ribbon cutting over there with these companies, and that's how I recall this very important collaboration with three of our Black businesses in Prince George's County doing major work along the Blue Line Corridor. Teller, I just wanted to raise that so it'll further assist in the answering of the question you raised to our senator.
Thank you, Councilmember Hawkins. Last question that we have for the evening before everyone gives their closing remarks is we have a question about the administration is targeting LGBTQ and immigrant individuals. What can the federal, state, and county government do to protect these individuals?
Who would you like to start with?
We can start off with you, Councilmember Hawkins.
Thank you for the question. And one thing I am grateful to say, and I'm excited about how the local government is working right here in Prince George's County, working with our acting county executive, Tara Jackson, the council leadership, and the school leadership. I mentioned earlier, right at our school system, we have put in place in writing stipulations that ICE cannot come into any of our schools without a 2-day to 3-day notification. They can't come in and take any of our scholars out of the schools. We have written legal stipulations in place that prevent them from doing that, so that when those young scholars are in our schools, they have an opportunity to feel safe and know that they're in a safe haven. Their parents know they're in a safe haven. And even as we work in the county, we are putting in place stipulations that individuals who are arrested, if it's something serious, they're going to have to deal with it. But if it's something for a fender bender or having a light out, our county officers cannot detain them until ICE come. We're just putting in place processes that ensure fairness and protection of our citizens during these vulnerable times.
Did anyone else want to add to that?
Well, we put the Maryland state government, like I said earlier, we put a lot of investment into the blueprint for Maryland's future, and English as a second language, ESL, and wraparound services are all things for all folks impacted. So our goal is, when we're focusing on education, it impacts everybody as a whole. And Maryland is not leaving anybody behind when it comes to fully funding the blueprint and fully funding, making sure everyone is protected under our schools.
I appreciate that. So we're approaching the top of the hour, and at this point, unless U.S. Senator Angela Alsobrooks.
I'll just say two quick things. First of all, we need comprehensive immigration reform. That's what we need. And this could have happened. We had a comprehensive immigration bill that was put forward on a bipartisan basis. And then candidate Donald Trump said he wasn't interested in a solution to our border issue or to immigration. He was interested in chaos because he thought this would help him to get elected. So we need serious-minded people. We need on both sides to really work on comprehensive immigration reform for our country. And we need to make sure that we are likewise respecting the humanity of the men and women who have come to our country as immigrants, who have contributed tremendously to our communities, who contribute in business, who contribute in arts, and contribute in so many other ways to our communities. And I'd say the same thing for our LGBTQ community, whose humanity ought to be respected at every hand, and making sure that we are protecting their safety, protecting their well-being, and treating them as the valuable humans that they are in our society and our communities. And that's what I will continue to do, is to make sure that we are, of course, we need reforms in immigration, and, I'll be supportive of those. But we ought to be protecting and respecting the humanity of the men and of the people who are in our country, and that's immigrants, and most especially, I'll be there to stand. We should not be, taking advantage of, or using as a whipping boy I'm sorry, or using, really, we should be protecting the humanity of our communities.
Now, I want to remind everyone that's taking part in this call as we're approaching the top of the hour. In the chat, they're getting ready to put a link for help for residents in Maryland, whether you're a federal employee or you work in some capacity and you're dealing with a job loss and you're confused. You need questions. You need to talk to somebody and need to get information correctly. So that link is going to be put in the chat. You'll see that. Also, just to remind you too, if you need resources and if you're impacted by the federal layoffs, you can go to Maryland, spell it out, .gov/federal worker. That is Maryland, spelled out, .gov/federal worker. We are now going to have our closing remarks, starting off with U.S. Senator Angela Alsobrooks.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Taylor, for moderating tonight's discussion. Certainly want to thank Councilmember Hawkins, Senator Nick Charles, and also thank you to Rob Shriver for taking time from Democracy Forward to be with us tonight. These are really, really critical times. They are times that call for not only swift and aggressive legislative action. And when I say that, I want people to understand that it is not going to be, we're going to be working hard. The Democratic Party will. But we also need people to be reaching out to my Republican colleagues to make sure that they understand as well the needs and desires of our communities, that this is not what this administration promised. They promised they would lower costs and make life better for Americans. And that's so far not at all what has happened. But I'll be continuing to work with my colleagues to take as much legislative action as we can, while also working in a team fashion, to work to support the lawsuits that have been filed. Our Attorney General in the state has filed, along with others, and making sure that we are also answering questions and doing everything we can to protect federal workers who have been adversely affected, both financially, mentally, and in every other way. We'll be really supporting our federal workforce. They are our neighbors and friends and family members, and we're going to be here standing tall with them and for them throughout the duration of this. And I can tell you that we're not going to stop fighting for them. We're going to continue. We're going to fight for them all the way through. And I'm convinced that over time we're going to be successful in many, many respects in fighting for and defending and protecting the rights and freedoms of Americans.
Thank you so much. Maryland State Senator Nick Charles, closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Taylor. And once again, thank you for moderating, and thank you to Senator Alsobrooks and Councilman Hawkins and to Rob Shriver as well. I want everybody on the call to know that they are not alone, and we are here for them. I know you put up the site that the governor has up now. Another thing for all the federal employees that are here, I have a bill to protect our Federal Workers Act. We will be having a hearing on March 1st, and it's expanding our unemployment insurance accessibility for folks who are dealing with agencies being closed down, such as you saw as USAID, some of these mass layoffs that you've seen. And so making sure that our federal workers have true access to resources, that's a bill that I'm proud to co-sponsor and cross-file with many senators We have also on that Senator Jackson, Augustine, Wallstriker, Senator Muse, Senator Benson, Senator Rosa Pep, Senator Watson, Senator Kagan, a lot of the Prince George's County and Montgomery County state senators. But I also want to give a shout out to Maryland State Delegate Jazz Lewis, who brought this bill forward for the House. Collectively, we see that there is a major issue. And this isn't going to be an issue that's going to be done tomorrow. This is something we're going to have to plant our feet and dig our heels in and truly stand in the gap to be able to be protectors for all of our workers. And so we have to grow our economy in many different areas so that we aren't so heavily relying on the federal workforce. We have to, so folks have opportunities. If they cut these jobs, where are our people going to go? So we need to have opportunities for people. So thank you again, Taylor. March 1st, as a reminder for everybody, in Annapolis, in the Budget and Tax Committee at 1 o'clock. That's what a hearing will be. So thank you all.
Rob Shriver, thank you so much, Maryland Senator Nick Charles. Rob Shriver from Democracy Forward, will you take a few seconds to give us closing remarks?
Sure. Thanks, Taylor. And so for my remarks, I'm just going to say this is Project 2025 in action. This is what President Trump said he didn't know anything about during the campaign, but they're implementing it. And as the senator mentioned, they've got their guy at OMB, Russ Vought, who's implementing it. And the biggest problem I have is that it seems to be driven by this assumption that federal workers are part of some deep state conspiracy to thwart and impede the Trump administration. Look, I know federal workers. I've worked with federal workers my entire career. You leave your politics at the door. You work hard, no matter who is in charge. And I was just looking at some of the agencies that work in PG County. So I don't think that the people that are showing up at Goddard Space Center are showing up there every day thinking, how can I stop the Trump administration today? The folks at Patuxent Research Refuge or the Job Corps Center in Laurel, I don't think you're showing up saying, how can I stop Trump from implementing his agenda? The folks at the Census Bureau in Suitland or the IRS workers in New Carrollton, you guys do now what you've always done. You show up, you work hard for the American people, you take your direction from the boss, and you do your job day to day. So it's not fair. It's not fair that you're being targeted in this way. It is what Project 2025 promised. Democracy Forward was ready to go. That's why we've been suing so much to help protect federal workers across the country, including here in PG County. And we won't win them all, but we've been winning a lot. And so just know we were ready to go. We're here to advocate for you and protect your rights through all the different ways to do it, all the different courts, administrative venues, and everything else. And you can get more information on civilservicestrong.org. Thanks for having me again.
Civilservicestrong.org.
Civilservicestrong.org.
civilservicestrong.org. And as we said before, there's also additional information for Maryland residents who need help. The link is in the chat. It's also for those who need resources. If you've been impacted by the federal layoffs, you can go to Maryland, spell it out, .gov/federal worker. And closing us out is Prince George's Council member, Calvin Hawkins, with closing statements.
Hello, thank you. I want to thank United States Senator Angela Alsobrooks, Maryland State Senator Nick Charles, Ron Shriver. Thank you for being a part of this very important conversation. And to those of you who are listening and you tuned in, I pray that it's something one of us said helped you along with your understanding of what's going on. As one of your local representatives at the county level, I will continue to work hard to ensure our federal workers and our federal contractors have resources, opportunities right here in our local government, notwithstanding the fiscal challenges we're dealing with. My friends, when we had the federal shutout, we were there for you. During COVID-19, we were there for you. We will be here as we build our economy and provide opportunities as we move forward, that you will be proud of your public servants, from our United States Senator to our Maryland State Senator, and even to yours truly. Again, thank you for joining us. Have a good night. Thank you, Taylor.
Thank you. Be safe, and thank you for joining tonight's virtual town hall.